parents demanded that I invite my sister, who slept with an ex of mine, to my wedding. They claimed it was a good opportunity to rebuild the bond and threatened not to come if I didn't. I'm Katie, 27 years old, and I recently tied the knot. You'd think it was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, right? Well, not exactly. What was supposed to be a beautiful celebration turned into a chaotic circus thanks to my lovely family. Instead of enjoying the moment, I found myself dodging drama at every turn. They seemed determined to ruin my wedding, and honestly, they almost succeeded. But I'm not one to just sit back and take it, so I decided to give them a taste of their own medicine. And now they're acting like I'm the villain in this whole story. I need some outside perspective here, so let me tell you exactly what went down. Let me give you a bit of backstory. I'm the youngest in a family of 5. First, there's my mom. She's the textbook definition of an almond mom. You know, the type who's always on some new fat diet and subtly, or not so subtly, judges everything you eat. Then there's my dad, who pretty much only cares about money. If it doesn't involve stocks, investments, or the word profit, it's like he can't be bothered. Now, let's talk about my older sister. To put it nicely, she's a bit of a nightmare. We've never had a good relationship. She's always been the golden child, while I was, well, just there. Growing up, she had this talent for making my life miserable. For example, she'd constantly find ways to humiliate me in front of others, and somehow always managed to twist things around so I look like the bad guy. It's safe to say we don't have the best bond. The only person in the family I actually get along with is my grandma. She's the sweetest, most down-to-earth person and, honestly, the only one who's ever made me feel like I mattered. As for me, I was shipped off to boarding school for most of my life. So, I never really developed a close bond with anyone in the family. While my sister got all the attention, I was more or less out of sight, out of mind. Growing up, I was pretty close to my auntie too. She was like the cool, fun adult in my life, and we spent a lot of time together. But then, when I was around 13, she suddenly moved out. I never really understood why, and it happened right before I got shipped off to boarding school. So, whatever connection I had with her, and honestly, with the rest of my family, just faded away. Now let me tell you how I ended up in boarding school, the short version. It's all thanks to my sister. She absolutely hated that mom, and dad decided to have a second kid. She wanted all the attention for herself, so she made it her life's mission to make mine a living hell. I became her favorite scapegoat for everything. My sister had this habit of breaking things around the house, like mom's favorite vase or dad's golf trophies, and then somehow, I'd always get the blame. She'd put on her best innocent face, crocodile tears and all, and tell them some ridiculous story about how I did it. One time, she even convinced them that I had stolen money from dad's wallet, which was ridiculous because I didn't even know where he kept it. But of course, they believed her. When I was 12, things really blew up once she accidentally spilled red juice all over mom's favorite white couch and told mom I was the one who did it because I was careless. Another time, she tore up dad's important papers for work and claimed she saw me doing it out of boredom. Of course, they believed her every time. The days would end, but my stories regarding my sister would never come back to the point. The final straw was when she broke a precious family heirloom, a crystal bowl that had been in our family for generations. She swore up and down that I was playing around and knocked it over. Mom and dad were furious. Instead of listening to me, they decided I was too much trouble and packed me off to boarding school. My parents were pretty much MIA for most of my life. They never really showed up for any of my school events. I remember once I had a big recital where I was playing the piano, and it was a huge deal for me. I looked out into the audience, hoping to see them there, but nope, just a sea of strangers. Another time, I had a science fair project that I spent weeks on, and when I won first place, they weren't there to celebrate. They didn't call much either. I was mostly on my own, and after a while, it just stopped bothering me. It became normal to not have them around. When I finished school and moved back to my hometown for college, I thought maybe things would be different. I was back living with my sister, and the drama started up again. Living with her was like stepping back into a war zone. She still managed to make everything about her and turn every little thing into a conflict. My sister was the popular one in college. Everyone knew her. She'd lived in the area her whole life, so she was kind of a big deal. I, on the other hand, was the new kid, trying to keep a low profile. But she couldn't stand the idea of people comparing us, so she made it her mission to make my life a living nightmare. She started by making snide comments whenever we were around her friends. One time, she casually mentioned, in front of everyone, that I was a late bloomer in academics, which wasn't even true. Another time, she threw a huge party and made sure I wasn't invited, just to make me feel like an outsider. The final straw was prom night. I caught her with my boyfriend, and she didn't even bother to hide it. It was like she wanted me to see her flaunting him in front of me. It was so blatant. She was practically gloating about how she could take whatever she wanted, including my boyfriend. I'd had enough. I told Mom about it, hoping for some support or at least a little understanding, but she just brushed it off like it was no big deal. So, I made the decision to leave. I moved to a different city for college and university, cutting ties with my family and starting fresh. So, after moving out, I finished college and university in my new city. I had to ask my family for money to cover my tuition, and thankfully, they agreed to help out. It wasn't until later that I found out it was actually Grandma who was footing the bill, not Mom and Dad. But hey, at least someone cared enough to help while I was building my new life. While I was there, I met someone amazing. I fell in love, and we got engaged. It was a beautiful experience. He treated me so well, and for once, I felt like I was truly cherished. We decided to get married, and it was everything I dreamed of and more. It was time to tell my family. I was both excited and anxious about sharing the news. After everything I'd been through, I wanted them to know I was doing well and was happy. When I told my family about the engagement, their reaction was pretty underwhelming. It was like they were barely interested, just a casual, "Oh, okay, fine." They didn't seem to have any major issues with it, but they weren't exactly thrilled either. I was okay with that. I didn't expect them to suddenly become super enthusiastic. So, the wedding planning began. My mom suggested that I come back home and have the wedding there. Honestly, I wasn't too sure about that idea. I'd made a life for myself in my current town, and I wanted to celebrate the occasion here. So, I decided to stay put and plan the wedding locally. When it came to the actual planning, my parents were pretty much absent. They didn't offer much help or input. On the other hand, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were incredibly supportive. They really stepped up and helped with everything from finding the perfect venue to coordinating details. I felt truly included and supported by them, which made the whole process a lot more enjoyable. Now it was time to send out the invitations. After they went out, I had a conversation with Mom. She mentioned that I'd made a mistake on the invites. I hadn't included my sister's name. Before I could even explain, she brushed it off and said it was no big deal because she'd already informed my sister about the wedding and that they'd all be there. I was like, hold on a second, that wasn't an error. I didn't include her intentionally. I don't want her at my wedding. But Mom just brushed me off, acting like I was throwing a tantrum. She told me not to be silly and that it was a minor mistake. When I pointed out that my sister had slept with my ex and that's why I didn't want her there, Mom got furious. She argued that I was being unreasonable and holding grudges. She insisted that I shouldn't let old grudges affect family relationships and that I should use this opportunity to rebuild our bond. I was completely floored. I mean, really, rebuilding bonds with someone who had betrayed me so badly? It felt like Mom was completely disregarding my feelings and prioritizing family unity over my own well-being. I wasn't having any of it. I told Mom that there had never been any real family unity and that I had always been sidelined. I made it clear that I didn't want my sister at my wedding, period. Mom countered by saying that if I didn't let my sister come, no one from the family would show up. That was the last straw. I was furious and couldn't believe she was using that as leverage. I didn't even bother arguing anymore. I just ended the call and decided to stick to my guns about not having her at the wedding. I spent some time fuming over everything, and then it hit me. My family had never really cared about my feelings. If they were threatening not to attend my wedding just because I didn't want my sister there, why should I care about their opinions? So, I decided to take a stand. I planned to invite someone else, someone my family had major beef with, my aunt. It was a bit of a rebellious move, but it felt right. If my family wanted to play games, I'd just invite someone who would shake things up and show them that I wasn't going to let them dictate my day. Let me give you a bit of backstory about my aunt. She was always Dad's least favorite, and there was this ongoing tension between them. Despite that, she was always super kind and loving towards me and my sister. But then something happened. I'm not entirely sure what, but there was a huge fallout, and she ended up moving away. Over the years, I pieced together that Dad had somehow framed her and stirred up problems between her and Grandma. There were also issues with her marriage, which, as far as I could tell, were mostly Mom's doing. I never got the full story, but it was clear that Dad had done a real number on her. So, with all this in mind, I decided to reach out to my aunt. Maybe it was time to reconnect and invite someone into my life who actually cared and had been wronged by my family as well. It felt like a way to balance the scales. Reaching out to my aunt was a bit tricky at first. She didn't respond to my attempts to contact her, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and visit her in person. Fortunately, she didn't live too far from me, though I was surprised to find out she had been in the area all along. When I showed up at her place, she was a bit cold initially, but after I explained everything, how my mom, dad, and sister had treated me and how I had always felt neglected, she invited me in. We sat down for tea, and she started to open up about what had happened between her and the family. Here's the scoop. Aunt had a boyfriend whom Grandma didn't approve of. Mom and Dad took it upon themselves to fill Grandma's head with lies, making her believe that Aunt was planning to elope and didn't care about Grandma's feelings. They told Aunt that Grandma had given her an ultimatum: either break up with the boyfriend or be disowned. Aunt was devastated and tried to reason with Grandma, but Grandma had already been told that Aunt had chosen the boyfriend over her. The situation escalated quickly. Grandma suffered a minor shock and had to be hospitalized. Dad told Aunt that Grandma didn't want to see her and would disown her, which wasn't true at all. Dad's manipulation continued when he claimed Aunt had abandoned Grandma in her time of need, making Aunt feel utterly betrayed and rejected. Mom and Dad didn't stop there. They continued to spread rumors, claiming Aunt was selfish and heartless, and accused her of not caring about the family's reputation. They even went so far as to say Aunt had stolen money from Grandma's account to cover her boyfriend's expenses, which was a complete fabrication. I realized later that my parents had likely created much of the drama to drive a wedge between her and Grandma. However, by then she didn't have the courage to face Grandma again after everything that had happened. She never reached out to repair the relationship, which only added to the confusion and hurt. Mom and Dad had a talent for causing misunderstandings and sowing discord. They twist stories and manipulate situations to make others look bad. They even once told relatives that Aunt had been the cause of Grandma's health problems, painting her as a villain in a family drama she never intended to be a part of. I managed to convince my aunt to come to my wedding and later try to clear things up with Grandma. It took some persuading, but she agreed to attend. I also told her about how my sister had treated me and how my family was insisting that I invite her as well. She agreed to come, even though she wasn't thrilled about it. On the wedding day, things started off rocky. My sister showed up with my mom, and they immediately started making snide remarks. My mom was giving my sister all her attention until she saw Aunt. The look of shock and anger on her face was priceless. Mom came up to me, fuming, and demanded to know why I had invited Aunt. I told her that we needed to rebuild our family bonds, and that it was a chance to be a happy family again. Mom was livid. She wanted to make a scene, but I had already informed my sister-in-law about the situation. She stepped in and helped manage things, ensuring that we could proceed with the ceremony smoothly despite the tension. We managed to have a lovely ceremony. I could feel my family's daggers aimed at me as I walked down the aisle, but the ceremony was beautiful, and for once, I felt like I was making my own choices and standing up for myself. After the wedding ceremony, it was time for the reception, but that's when things went off the rails. My aunt had taken Grandma to a separate room to talk, and my parents were frantically trying to get in to see what was going on. They were practically banging on the door, desperate to interfere. Meanwhile, my sister was making snide comments about how the wedding wasn't up to par and how the decorations were cheap. My sister-in-law had quick and classy responses, like pointing out how everyone had a great time and how the focus should be on the newlyweds rather than making petty remarks. I was exhausted and didn't want to deal with any of this drama, especially not my sister's constant negativity. I told my parents to give Aunt and Grandma some space and let them talk privately, but instead of listening, they started yelling at me, accusing me of trying to ruin their so-called happy family. They said I was being selfish and trying to create more drama. My husband and mother-in-law had had enough. They stepped in and threatened to throw my parents out if they didn't stop making a scene. At this point, Dad lost it. He insulted me in front of everyone, saying things like he never liked me and that I was always the problem child. He called me a disappointment and said it had always been difficult to deal with. I felt like I was going to break down, so my husband stepped up and called security. They came in and escorted my parents out of the venue. It was a tough moment, but I was grateful for my husband's support. The reception continued, and despite the chaos, we managed to salvage what was left of the night and enjoy ourselves after the ceremony wrapped up. I finally had a moment to check my phone, only to find it flooded with messages from my family, and that's when it hit me. I had completely forgotten about my sister. I assumed she left after my parents were thrown out. But no, she was still at the wedding. Not only that, but she had gone live on social media in full tears, ranting about how ungrateful I was for throwing our parents out of my own wedding. Apparently, she was spinning this whole sob story for her followers, saying how I had been a nightmare my entire life. She claimed that I'd always been jealous of her, that I never appreciated the love and support the family gave me. She made it sound like I was some selfish brat who mistreated her, always trying to one-up her or push her aside. She said I ruined the family's reputation by inviting Aunt, and then had the audacity to disrespect my parents on the most important day of my life. Her live stream was full of exaggerated drama, like claiming I'd always been a problem, that I was difficult to love, and how she had tried so hard to be a good sister but I had pushed her away. According to her, she was the perfect daughter who carried the family while I was some rebellious, ungrateful disaster who didn't know the meaning of family. The comments were eating it up too, with people sending her sympathy and saying things like, "How could your own sister do that? You deserve better. You're too good for her." I couldn't believe it. She was hijacking my wedding to paint herself as the golden girl instead of enjoying my wedding. I was completely trapped by my sister's drama. It was like I couldn't escape my family's chaos even on my big day. I needed to get away, so I called Grandma, hoping for some sanity. Turns out, Grandma and Aunt had been together the whole time. After their little one-on-one during the wedding, when Grandma picked up, she actually sounded kind of peaceful. I asked her how it went, and she said that she and Aunt had finally talked, really talked, for the first time in years, apparently. They opened up about everything that happened all those years ago. She told Grandma about how Mom and Dad twisted the whole situation with her boyfriend and explained how she tried to tell Grandma the truth. But by then, Mom and Dad had already filled Grandma's head with lies, like how Aunt was going to run off and abandon the family. They even told Grandma that Aunt didn't care about what she thought and would elope no matter what. Aunt was heartbroken when Grandma gave her that ultimatum: break up with her boyfriend or be disowned. Grandma was shocked hearing all of this because she thought and just decided to leave. But Aunt explained that after Grandma had that minor shock and ended up in the hospital, Dad wouldn't let her visit. He told her that Grandma didn't want to see her and had made up her mind to cut her off. She believed him, of course, and didn't want to cause more problems, so she just left in frustration. Dad made sure Grandma thought Aunt didn't care, while Aunt thought Grandma had turned her back, a total mess. They started piecing things together right there at my wedding. Grandma even said that over the years, she had been hurt and confused by how it just vanished. She always wondered why it never reached out, especially after Grandma's health scares. Aunt said she tried, but every time, Dad or Mom blocked her. One time, she had sent flowers to Grandma after surgery, but Mom told Grandma they were from a family friend. There were calls Aunt made that never got through because Mom would handle them. There was even a birthday when Aunt sent a card, and Mom conveniently forgot to pass it on. Grandma apologized, saying she regretted not questioning things sooner, and it admitted she'd been too angry and scared to reach out after everything. They cried, hugged, and just like that, years of tension melted away. So while I was dealing with my sister's meltdown and my parents' outbursts, at least Grandma and Aunt managed to make peace. If anything good came out of this wedding, it was that. I've decided to sue my sister for defamation because I'm so done with this family. My aunt and grandma are supporting me and said that she also wants to sue my parents for manipulation and mental harassment. Now my parents are blaming me, saying that I caused all these problems. Seriously, Ida, for not giving in to my parents' demand and inviting my aunt? Or Ida, for standing up for myself? I need opinions. Update. It's been a week since the wedding, and things have been interesting, to say the least. I've been reading your comments, and thank you for the support. Now, the ones calling me stupid and saying I deserve it because I put up with my family for so long and shouldn't have invited them. Guys, be realistic. This is my family we're talking about. I love them, of course. Now I have other opinions. But back then I never imagined they would stoop this low. Anyway, here's the update. My mother-in-law is a bit annoyed by all the drama, which I totally get. I mean, who wants to deal with this nonsense right after a wedding? But honestly, she's been great overall, just a little irritated by how everything went down. On the bright side, my husband and sister-in-law are fully backing me up. They've been amazing through all of this, which makes dealing with my family a little more bearable. Oh, and I've actually sued my sister for that video she posted. Yeah, I'm taking her to court on the grounds of defamation. According to my lawyer, I've got a solid case. He says that by broadcasting all those lies about me, she's damaged my reputation, and that could have serious legal consequences for her. We're talking about possible damages for emotional distress and even loss of reputation. Apparently, she could end up paying a hefty fine or even being forced to publicly retract her statements. Serves her right, honestly. But that's not all. My aunt decided she wasn't going to let my parents off the hook, either. She's suing them for manipulation and mental harassment. The lawyer thinks she has a good case, too, especially with all the evidence of how they messed with her life, blocking her from seeing grandma, spreading lies, and basically gaslighting her for years. If things go our way, my parents might be looking at some serious legal repercussions, like compensatory damages for the emotional toll they've put her through since the lawsuits were filed. My parents have been in full panic mode. At first, they tried to fix things by calling and texting, saying how sorry they were and that we should drop the lawsuits for the sake of the family. When that didn't work, they lashed out, blaming me for everything. They said I was destroying the family, that I was just being vindictive, and that all they ever wanted was to keep the family together. My dad even accused me of being ungrateful and spiteful, saying I was punishing them for trying to do the right thing. But honestly, I'm done with their guilt trips. Update 2. We finally had our day in court, and honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. First up, my sister showed up with this whole poor me attitude, like she was the victim in all of this. It was almost laughable in court. My lawyer laid out all the evidence, including the social media posts where she went live crying and spreading lies about me, throwing out my parents' mistreatment of her, and being this awful, selfish person. The judge didn't look too impressed by her act. My sister tried to play it off like it was a misunderstanding, but the video spoke for itself. She was very clear about her intentions to publicly humiliate me. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The judge said her actions were deliberate and malicious, and I was awarded compensation for emotional distress. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to make a point. She's also been ordered to publicly retract her statements and post an apology on all her social media platforms, which is probably the best part because we all know how much she cares about her online image. Chef's kiss. Now on to my parents' aunt's case was much more complicated, but she nailed it in court. She had text messages, old emails, and even some letters that showed just how much mom and dad had manipulated her over the years. It was wild. There were messages where dad was telling grandma that aunt didn't care about her, and another one where mom had actually pretended to be grandma, telling aunt to stay away. The lawyer went through everything, and it was pretty clear that my parents had spent years playing mind games with her. The court ruled in favor of aunt. My parents were found guilty of emotional and mental harassment and have to pay her a significant sum in compensatory damages. Let's be honest, it's more money than they ever spent on me. They also got a restraining order against them, so they're not allowed to contact her or come near her anymore. Honestly, I think she's relieved more than anything else. She's finally free from their control, and it's like this huge weight has been lifted off her shoulders. My parents tried to act like they were the victims the whole time, claiming they just wanted to protect the family, but the court wasn't buying it. At one point, Dad even yelled in the courtroom about how Aunt and I were ungrateful, how he sacrificed for the family, and how I've been a problem child my whole life. The judge shut him down pretty quickly. It was kind of satisfying to watch, honestly. So that's where we are now. My sister is officially shamed on social media. My aunt has her piece, and my parents have finally been held accountable for their nonsense. Update 3. Well, the roller coaster keeps on rolling, but this time it's actually looking up. So here's the latest news. Grandma has officially decided to remove mom and dad from her property and inheritance. Yep, you read that right. She's had enough of their manipulations, and she's naming everything to Aunt and me. Honestly, I was shocked when she told me, but she said it was the only way she could really move forward and feel at peace. I guess after seeing how much mom and dad messed with Aunt, she realized they didn't deserve anything. Aunt tried to tell her it wasn't necessary, but Grandma was firm. You both deserve this after everything, she said. Of course, my parents aren't taking it well. They've been trying to stir up trouble, but this time they're going through my mother-in-law. Yep, they've been calling and texting her, trying to paint me as the villain and get her on their side. But let me tell you, my MIL is no fool. She shut them down real quick, and she even forwarded me their pathetic messages. It's honestly kind of embarrassing how desperate they've become. After seeing how Aunt handled everything, I decided to follow in her footsteps and get a restraining order against my family. It was the right move for me. I don't want them pulling any more stunts, especially not when they're now trying to involve my husband's family. The restraining order gives me peace of mind, knowing they can't keep harassing me or anyone else in my life, for that matter. But besides that, everything else is actually going really well. Things with my husband are great. We're just trying to settle into married life without all the unnecessary chaos. Honestly, I wish this drama had never happened. But in a weird way, it feels like things are better now. It's like all the toxic energy has finally been cleared out of my life. Grandma and Aunt have even started living together, and they seem so much happier now. It's really nice to see them both at peace after everything. Life feels easier, calmer. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be. So yeah, I guess this is the conclusion.